Some of you have seen my presentation before this. What I'm doing each time is I'm refining it. So there's some new information here. And you won't have to sit through the same presentation if you've been in here before. I know I see some new faces, and welcome to this part of the project. What I'm talking about is the overall creative placemaking project and how the different parts fit together. And I'm going to be alluding to some of what Peter has talked about with respect to the park, but I'm focusing primarily on the William Street commercial corridor and how it interacts with the surrounding neighborhood. It's really it's one of our better opportunities for really imprinting a sense of place upon this neighborhood. So what you're seeing here in the first slide is a postcard from the first decade of the 20th century when Hodges Square had a very functional purpose. It was a crossroads, and it was a place where people watered their horses. There used to be an old fountain there, and it really created a landmark. I mean, the Hodges Square place was made by this fountain. It was the creative placemaking of Hodges Square, and this is from about 100 years ago. The fountain was removed. It's been gone for a long time, but it didn't completely disappear, and I'll get to that in a few minutes. I just want to point out, though, that across the bottom you see the logos of the different organizations that are working together on this project. So it's real important to understand that this is we call it a cross-sector collaboration between all kinds of organizations. This is how planning needs to be done in the 21st century. We have the institutional presence, we have the municipal presence, we have the creative presence of the hot school artists who have been doing the art jams and working in the schools. They're engaging the young people, they're getting them interested in this. We're engaging the adults. We have Thames Valley Sustainable Connections, Art and Jerry. They're thinking very hard about how to create a sustainable organization here that lives on beyond this project, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. We have Landmarks that's really pushing these workshops. My firm, Kent Frost, is working on the urban planning along with the Yukon organization, the Community Research Design Collaborative, which is represented by Peter. The Riverside Park Conservancy, which is represented here tonight, Donna, you're part of it, and other people may be part of it. I mean, we're all collaborating here, and that's the real beauty of this kind of project. So, just quickly, what is creative placemaking? The state has come up with a definition. I'm not going to read it, but they're really looking at how to position art as a driver of economic stimulation. Connecticut's a real leader in this area. Connecticut has taken most of their arts funding and they really consolidated it into creative placemaking. And creative placemaking isn't just building outdoor art. It's staging events. It's marketplaces, farmers markets like in Torrington above. It's the art jams in the park that imprint a mental image of a positive place in people's minds because of an experience they had. It is the traditional downtown urban murals on the blank sides of buildings, like in New London at the parking garage. Philadelphia mural arts program has been going on for a long time. There's I believe, an amazing number of murals in Philadelphia. It's well over 1,000 murals in Philadelphia. It's just outstanding. They've been doing this for a long time. It's the Hygienic Art Park in downtown New London, which everyone's familiar with. About 10 years old this year, or at least the project began 10 years ago, has really been a driver of economic development in downtown New London. Everybody agrees with that. It's also this sort of thing where it's just temporary art set up in the fashion district in New York City to bring attention to the Fashion Week events that are going on. And the National Endowment for the Arts has been pushing this for a long time. The Project for Public Spaces, which Peter mentioned earlier, has also been pushing this for even longer. And their approach is to really think hard about what makes a public place active and then test it. And they promote a philosophy they refer to as lighter, quicker, cheaper. They want to set this up, try it out, make sure the community buys into it, tweak it, design it for a lasting permanence, and then build it, and then really build it. And anybody that's been in New York City recently has seen this. You may not have really noticed it, but what's going on is the pavement is being painted. We refer to it as the power of painted pavement. Everybody's, if you've been in New York, you've probably been to Times Square, and you've seen what they've done there. It's happening all over the city. It's an approach that can work in almost any urban area, and we're very interested in exploring it in this particular project. So here's your overall project area. It's the city limit on the north and the west. It's a river. It's State Pier. It's I-95. And bisecting through it is Williams Street here, Route 32, which is not really in play for us because there's no pedestrian access on it. But Williams Street is very important as a commercial corridor. And Crystal Avenue, which is right here, is very important as a transportation corridor through the center of the neighborhood. Also because it interacts with Riverside Park. So we have these two north-south corridors, William Street here, and it goes underneath the highway, and then it continues. And then we have Crystal Avenue, and then we have these other streets that are bisecting it. And we're really interested in all of those. But the one that we're really focusing on is William Street. That's got the blue line on it. I'm turning the orientation in all different directions. North is now to your left. There's the Gold Star Bridge. We've got these incredible cultural institutions like Conn College, which is right here, the Coast Guard Academy here, the Lyman Island Museum. We've also got these residential communities that really need to be engaged. And in these workshops, we've had good representation from the, I'll call it Riverside Heights neighborhood. I don't know if it really has a name, but it is on the heights of the hill over Riverside Park. So I'm going to refer to it as Riverside Heights neighborhood. It used to be completely contiguous with the rest of New London's neighborhoods, but of course we all know what happened. So we're interested in reconnecting. And Peter's project a couple of years ago dealt with that in great detail. One aspect that we're really looking at as part of this project is the opportunity to connect through a transportation linkage, specifically bicycle connections. Because we know William Street is very wide, Huntington Street is very wide, and it creates really almost a direct line into downtown. So from an alternative transportation point of view, it makes a lot of sense to look at that corridor as an eligible transportation enhancement project. Those kinds of projects are also eligible for high-level funding. And we haven't really talked about how you would pay for this sort of thing yet, but we are thinking about it. So in this case, William Street, which I just mentioned, is a wide street. It's 44 feet wide and it's only 2 lanes. It currently has parallel parking only in certain sections. So you have a great deal of William Street that's a 44-foot wide 2-lane street. So what happens when you have an extremely wide 2-lane street? Do you pay attention to the speed limit? Typically not. You go as fast as your car wants to go in many cases, and it creates a lot of dangerous conditions. But when you change the use of a street and you include things like bicycle lanes and you're more strategic with your parking and you widen your sidewalks if possible and you install street trees and lighting and just more what we call visual friction in the planning parlance. Visual friction as well as having a lot of things that like Peter said, or maybe it was Tim, somebody said, folks will slow down if they think they might scratch their car. And when you've got a lot of activity on a roadway, it tends to slow you down. So why are we looking at the road? Well, again, go back to New York City. The Department of Transportation there has been taking these wide streets in the city like this. This is a before picture. And just thinking very intelligently about how the streets are used and how to diversify the roads to take a corridor that is dominated by automobiles before and converting it to what's referred to as a complete street. It's complete because it accommodates pedestrians, it accommodates bicyclists, it accommodates transit, parking. All these crossing points are better marked and safer. Landscaping is incorporated, stormwater is absorbed, the benefits are fantastic, and from an aesthetic standpoint, no one can disagree. What's less obvious is that the improvements or the changes improve safety dramatically. So here, the reduction in injuries in this particular part of Delancey Street, 54% improvement over just one year. So now to our site, here's William Street. Here's where Department of Transportation, their instrument listed 40 years ago, figured we're going to have a merging ramp condition onto William Street. This is going to be a free-flowing street into the city center. Somehow they thought this could work. They then at some point realized it's not going to happen. They put a stop sign up. That doesn't change the fact that it's a high-speed design, and it creates all kinds of problems. But we have to deal with it now, and we have to deal with situations like this, where in order to walk from Hodges Square into the rest of New London, you're faced with this kind of barrier. And Peter mentioned barriers. Well, this is one of them. There's nothing to stop you from walking there. It's all perceptual. But this is an inhospitable place to be. So our challenge is, what do you do with it? Even where there's a crosswalk in some of these situations, it's still not safe. I may be wrong, but I think there was a pedestrian hit on this crosswalk recently. Yeah, you're right. And the problem is, it just takes a long time to cross here. And we were talking about folks who, elderly folks and their mobility issues. If you're not a very fast walker, you can't get across this during the crossing cycle. So these are the kinds of issues that we just have to think about. Here's another issue that we have to think about. Enormous expanses of pavement that serve no real purpose. This isn't a roadway. This isn't a parking lot. There's no parking striping going on here. There's no real reason for it except it's left over from when all of this interchange work was done. Here's another example of what you can do with unnecessary pavement. This just wasn't really needed, and look what happened when they said, okay, let's share it with the bicyclists and the pedestrians. It really creates wonderful public space. And since there's not a lot of public space in the Hodges Square neighborhood, we have to look for it wherever we can find it. And in these little spaces between lanes and where intersections are wider than they need to be, these are really special places that we can't ignore. So here's another one. So looking at our area, we see, first of all, we have to look at things like zoning. On William Street, which is right in here, we've got a mix of commercial, mostly commercial, and some residential. It's neighborhood business. There are certain requirements there that make it more difficult for a property owner to develop this property than, say, in the downtown because of setbacks and parking requirements. But there are ways that those challenges can be overcome. It just takes a little creativity. So we think that the zoning can work, or we can look at possibly suggesting changes to zoning. But within existing zoning, we think that these sorts of improvements can work. We recommend that in general, in these kinds of neighborhood or commercial districts, there be some guidelines for new buildings and for renovating existing. This is from Willimantic. They've had a design guideline there for about 8 years now. They recommend that new and improved development take into account site planning for the pedestrian environment, the architecture, the signage, the lighting, the site amenities, landscaping, and parking areas. And there are recommendations for every one of these categories. And when these kinds of guidelines are used, a building that looks like that, which is just really not doing much for the streetscape or for the downtown, can be converted to that. It's the same building. And it was just renovated. They put a new roof on it. They gutted it. They put new uses. It's now a mixed-use building with retail on the ground floor. The Cafe Mantic coffee shops on the ground floor. Thank you, Ron. And there are apartments upstairs. So this is really contributing to the local economic health of Willimantic. because they really had a guidebook to get there. So an owner should look at these guidelines as an insurance policy to say, if I'm going to invest in a building here, this ensures that my neighbors will also invest at the same level as I am. So now our piece of real estate is Conn College to the north. We have a Route 32 bridge over Route 32 on William Street. We have the corridor. We have Bailey Circle. We have Hodges Square. And we have the underpasses. We've just kind of arbitrarily at this point identified these areas. We're interested in connecting to Conn College in a meaningful way so that the 1,000 plus students and staff are invited, compelled, and feel really like it's a worthwhile thing to walk or bike down to Hodges Square. Currently, this is the back door. It's really just uninviting and isolating when you're out there. So this is something to work with the college on. This is the bridge over Route 32. It's a very wide road. It was designed to accommodate a lot more traffic and a lot more connections to other high-speed roads, as Peter mentioned, than it currently or ever will. This is what has been done in this situation where these obsolete extra-wide bridges are retrofitted to be more pedestrian-friendly. This one's in Philadelphia. Down on William Street, again, we look at that and we say, this is what's possible. The little side street, Bailey's Circle, or Bailey Court, connects to the bike pedestrian trail off of the Gold Star Bridge. It's a fairly wide road, and it doesn't really serve much of a purpose for its 30 feet of width. It looks like this from above. We're thinking of what you can do with it. We think that the bike paths can certainly be enhanced and made more inviting and more of a gateway to New London for folks that are coming and going. This is looking back.
I never even knew that's how you got on it.
Yeah, everyone has a story about how my story was two guys biking from Brooklyn to Boston that I encountered on Coleman Street, got lost. They didn't know how to get here, and I drove very slowly from Coleman to this point with them following me so that they could continue on their journey. But that was a very telling moment for me to say, obviously you can't find this, so this is such an important place.
When you show the bike paths next to the roads, any consideration ever to be put in like in some European cities where they have, instead of the bike paths next to the motorist paths, having the parking, so you have motorists with motorists parking next to the roads, and then the bike paths next to the sidewalks. So you have like a progression of speed.
Yeah, I mean that's a possibility. It gets tricky at intersections. The most important thing is that the back bike path be wide enough that if somebody opens their door, if they're getting out of their car and they open their door, there's enough space there so that when you're biking, you're not even what we call the doors up. That can be a very dangerous situation. That's the most dangerous part of that mix of parking and biking. So in Boston, they built a trail many years ago, one of the first multi-use urban trails, the Minuteman Bikeway, and they had enough sense to put a sign like this up that gave you some wayfinding cues, gave you a little bit of placemaking, and welcomed you through a gateway to the Arlington Center. Other communities have gone farther. They've really celebrated this type of transportation and made it into something much more fun. Tour de France, temporary thing here. Bruges, Belgium, where they really, really, really love their bikes, and the whole city's oriented towards bicycling in the center. Fountain sculpture in the center square is this. I'm not sure where these two are, but you can see we're making places, and we're drawing on something that most people think is great, fun and family, and all the positives that you associate with urban living. The bicycle is certainly one of them for most people. And then lastly, this is just my favorite all-time monument or landmark to the bike, and I think about this when I drive down, when I come across from Groton on the Gold Star Bridge. I'm heading into William Street. I look to my right. I know Bailey Circle is there. I'd like to see some sort of landmark from the highway that says something is special over here. And what better way to do it than to landmark the entrance to the bike pedestrian trail over the Gold Star Bridge. Make that something that those of us driving by look over and go, wow, there's something cool over there. But also the people who are trying to find it on their bikes can see it from blocks away. Wouldn't that be great? Okay, so Bailey Circle is a street that we're interested in from the standpoint of its potential to be what's known as a living street. These are happening today all over the country. They're working on these in New York City. They've been working on the West Coast for a while. They started in Europe a long time ago. But it turns the whole idea of pedestrian safety upside down. It says, let the pedestrians and the automobiles mix freely on the same pavement. Just set it up so that everybody's watching out for each other. It's hard for us to imagine this can work because we're so used to people being run over by high-speed automobiles. But when you set these up properly, they do indeed work. Here's one that has actually been built recently. This is up in Washington State and Auburn. This is the central downtown commercial street. It's all one level. Notice where all the signs that say slow, speed limit, pedestrian crossing, they're not there. It's all about visual friction. It's all about people understanding that they are in a different kind of territory and they slow down. And it really does work. Or departments of transportation wouldn't be allowing this to be done in cities, towns across the country, but it is happening. So back to events. Now, we need to be clear that we're not just trying to build better sidewalks and street trees and that sort of thing. We're also trying to create places where these kinds of events that attract people will take place. We know that a lot of people that live in this area down the hill are disengaged from the community in many ways. We want to engage the people that live in I don't know the names of all the public housing complexes down. Thames River, I think is one of them. We want to give folks like that a reason to come up to Hodges Square to become engaged in the community. One of the best ways to do it is with a farmer's market. I know Art and Jerry are very interested in that. We really want to engage all the community. We want to have events that attract people of all spectrums of life, and we want to make the streetscape attractive also. So here's a case of William Street. We've got a mix of residential, where we've got residential rental next to commercial. Where there's residential uses, why not make it look like a residential use? Why not put picket fences and decent landscaping? Where it's commercial, why not really play it up as a commercial space where we have lighting and we have benches and we have better facades with awnings and inviting storefronts. We also need to provide wayfinding. People are lost in New London. There's been great improvement in the downtown with the wayfinding there. We can also extend it, or we can create a more unique type of wayfinding system that works in the northeast New London area that may play on some point of history or culture here. Back to the underpasses and the crosswalks. Communities have taken the same problem that we have, and they've made it an opportunity for art. So these underpasses can be lit with LED lights. It's not a big expense. It doesn't interfere with the structure, or it doesn't put paint on the DOT property. DOTs tend to like this sort of thing. But where we do have these blank expanses of concrete, a little paint can go a long way. And here's a mural that clearly represents a community. And you don't have to you don't know where this is, you just know here's a symbol of pride in the community. And that really sums it up. Back to the 19th century and that fountain, remember that? Hodges Square. This is almost the same viewpoint as that. This is looking up William Street. William Street's right there to the left. The fountain was somewhere in here. Well, the fountain still exists. Okay, how many people know that the fountain sits behind the Lyman Allen Museum? You do. Well, here it is. So I went back there a few weeks ago and took these pictures, but it is in fantastic condition. It's just gorgeous. So, you know, it's beautiful carved granite. It was commissioned by one of the family for her father, Lyman Allen, as a service to the community. And on the back of it, there's a plaque up there, Mary Turner Allen Henry, 1907. And there's an inscription that says, "Water is least valued among things existing and the most valued among things wanted." So we take it for granted until we really need it. And what occurs to me is that, you know, Peter mentioned that there once was a river that flowed through there, or at least it's a watershed. There was a stream that fed water to the Winthrop mill. It was all filled in and over time. But I'm interested in the idea of reinstalling the fountain. Let it be the point of beginning, perhaps, for a pathway or a water course that would, if not physically, at least conceptually, connect to the mill and then down to Winthrop Cove. I mean, that certainly is a storyline that could be exploited. That would help connect Hodges Square to the mill, to the cove, to the river, and Long Island Sound beyond. You know, it's the source to sea idea. Well, here's potentially our source. This is the water we really value because it's in short supply, and then we can follow the trail through history and through this connection to other landmarks and eventually to downtown. So that's a real intriguing idea. We're just beginning to think about it. And here is the square. What do you do with this? Well, this isn't an unfamiliar problem. We're looking down on Hodges Square. Here are the buildings, and you can see how chopped up this is. The roadways were all just spliced together with no particular purpose in mind. All the extra paving just floats there. Here you see it again from above. It works great if you've got an empty flatbed 18-wheeler park, like you run into one of the stores. But otherwise, it's just, yeah. Okay, so I'm a firm believer in what I said, doing case studies, looking at similar problems and how they've been solved so that we don't make the same mistakes or that we learn lessons from other people. So this is a place in Brooklyn. Putnam Square is what it's now called. It used to be referred to as Putnam Triangle because the triangle was this little island in the center of the intersection. Now, here's Hodges Square. This is just, to me, it's really uncanny. Look at the scale of the buildings. It's a very neighborhood commercial district. You know, it's not boutiques. These are neighborhood businesses. A grocery, a hair salon, some other stuff. There's a takeout in there. And here's Hodges Square. Very similar kind of space. So here is, back to Putnam, this street, the plan view is right here. They wanted to do something to really enliven and create a better sense of place in the center of their community. They began thinking about how about if we close this street off and we have a new traffic pattern, would this work? Well, in order to flesh this out in the community, there was workshops held. People sat down around tables like this. They put their ideas down on paper. They debated it. The results were, okay, let's try this out. This is what's being done in New York, and this is a project for public space philosophy being employed on a large scale. So all that was done is that the roadway was painted and then closed off, as you can see, with some temporary barriers, also the big white ubiquitous pots that are all over New York City now, some big granite blocks. And then they tried it out. They put tables, they put chairs, they put canopies, and they began staging events. First thing they did to kick this off was they had a big block party. They had all these community groups, performing groups, on a Saturday afternoon. It was a great success. Lots of people came. You know, I realize Brooklyn and New England are not really that similar. There's a lot more density, a lot more, more people here. So we're not really comparing apples to apples. But we're looking at a similar setting from a physical standpoint, and we're saying, with all this extra space we have in Hodges Square, would this sort of thing work? Well, here's a way that you can test this out. You can can try it out. What happens is, of course, you have people who don't think this will ever happen. And some residents and business owners initially expressed concerns with the space, saying it would stop the currents of the street and negatively impact businesses. Well, I think if I owned a business in here, I'd be very concerned about it. What actually happened, and this is less than 1 month old, the community has agreed that they really like it. So I just read an article a couple days ago, posted in January, that Putnam Triangle Plaza will be made permanent and built out space to come. They're going to physically construct something here that's permanent. The street is gone forever. And you understand how they got there. They didn't force this down the community's throat. They worked through it progressively. They let everybody try it out. They let everybody debate it. Folks realized, wow, this is great. This is really attracting more people than we ever had before. So this is what was just written about the Putnam Square. I just changed a few of the words here. Welcome to Hodges Square Plaza, a new public space on William Street for you to enjoy in New London's northeast neighborhood near Riverside Park. Does that sound good to you? Sounds good to me. All right, thanks. That's my show.